Well, welcome to the second plenary session. I'm going to share my screen and show a few PowerPoint slides, and then we will go from there. I want to start out by sharing the Colorado State University land acknowledgement. Colorado State University acknowledges with respect that the land we are on today is the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute nations and peoples. This was also a site of trade, gathering, and healing for numerous other native tribes. We recognize the indigenous peoples as original stewards of this land and all the relatives within it. As these words of acknowledgement are spoken and heard, the ties nations have to their traditional homelands are renewed and reaffirmed. CSU is founded as a land-grant institution, and we accept that our mission must encompass access to education and inclusion, and significantly, that our founding came at a dire cost to Native nations and peoples whose land the university was built upon. This acknowledgement is the education and inclusion we must practice in recognizing our institutional history, responsibility, and commitment. I really do encourage you to follow that link to landacknowledgement.colorado.state.edu. They've created really a wonderful video. I know we couldn't hear it in the first plenary, but I think it's well worth watching. So I wanted to start out today with a note. We're talking about three things in our theme. Today we're talking about where are we at now. In Monday's plenary, we talked about where have we been. And I wanted to sort of call out one really important event in our history. And Barbara Walvert, who's actually here today, so it's great to see you, Barbara. She led the first WAC faculty seminar in the 1969-70 academic year at Central College in Iowa. And this is largely viewed as the first official WAC moment. It's fair to say that WAC has been around longer than that. Certainly, if you've read David R. Russell's book about the development of writing across the curriculum, you'll know that people were talking about and writing about in the around 1912, for example, about how to write the long paper in engineering. And there have been numerous movements that have kind of pointed in this direction. But we can all look back at Barbara's WAC faculty seminar, which really kind of launched the first informal WAC program in the United States. And then following that, Harriet Sheridan at Carleton College launched what we see as the first formal WAC program. So I think that's really important to recognize these incredible achievements and to think about this. This is more than 50 years ago. And in theory, in the spring of 2020, or the summer of 2020, we would have been exactly on 50 years. And we're excited about 50 years of WAC, although right now, of course, it's 51 years. And I hope that continues for a long time. I also wanted to call attention to some of the folks that served as pioneers. These are folks who were doing work in the 1970s and 1980s. People like Harriet Sheridan, Elaine Maiman, Nell Ann Pickett, Harvey Weiner, Chris Tice, Art Yug, Toby Fulweiler, Judy Lambert, and Susan McLeod. Many of these folks are still with us. Some, unfortunately, no longer are, but they've done wonderful work. And it also includes Marty Townsend and Pam Childers, Jackie Jones Royster, and Teresa Wacky, Joan Mullen, Chuck Bazerman, Ann Ruggles-Gear, and Teresa Red, among others. There's so many people that did things. And I think one of the really important things we need to do is to recover some of our history. When I was doing some of the research for an article that I sent out a link to today about WAC at 50 that was in Across the Disciplines, I kept discovering new things, new peoples whose voices really weren't out there as much as some of the folks on these two slides. I think it's really important for us as a community to recover our history, to get those voices back, to see the work that they did and to memorialize it in various ways. So I hope that we can do that. And I think there are some projects that we have in mind that we should be able to follow up on. So I just wanted to share that as a way to start today's and provide a foundation really for the work that Pamela and Teresa are going to do today. So I also wanted to let you know, we have some recorded sessions. They're coming up where we've got Al Powell and all of the conference team are working hard on recording the sessions, getting them available and putting them in. If you go back into the WHUVA agenda, if you missed a session, go back today, tomorrow, the next day, really anytime in the next month or so, and you should be able to go back in and find the sessions that you missed and watch them. They've been recorded, in some cases edited. And I think that you'll find that very useful. I can certainly tell you right now, the uh, the two pre-conference workshops are available. The plenary from Monday is available. Several of the sessions on Monday and a growing number of sessions from Tuesday are available. Our goal is to get all of them available unless people have asked us not to share their video. So I just want to let you know that's available. Today's plenary, here's what we're going to be doing. We're going to have the first biennial WAC Awards. And following that, we're going to have the plenary presentation by Pamela Flash and Teresa Red. They're going to be introduced by Madeline Halseth. And following that, we'll have some discussion. So I'm looking forward to a really robust discussion. I know that Pamela and Teresa have really been doing a lot of work on this talk and just kind of following along with what they've been doing. I think it's going to be really exciting. But first, we're going to start out with the first biennial WAC Awards. And these are sponsored by the Association for Writing Across the Curriculum and the WAC Clearinghouse. They'll be made every other year at the IWAC conference. This is our first time through it. I think the people that worked on this really did a lot of work, and I'm really grateful to all the folks that were involved in this project. So I'll stop sharing my screen at this point, and Jesse is going to play the video. We decided, by the way, to keep things short, because you know how people can perhaps go longer than they think they're going. We asked everybody to send in videos, first explaining who won, and then having the recipients acknowledge and say thanks to folks. So we've kept it relatively short, and I think it'll be a fairly good video. I hope you like it. Hi, I'm Mike Blomquist,
And I'm Brian Hendrickson.
and we're excited to present the first ever WAC Awards for publication, for service, for achievement. These sets of awards came out of planning for the IWAC conference. It had occurred to me that we really hadn't had an opportunity to do WAC Awards in the past because we hadn't had an overarching organization. But with the emergence of the Association for Writing Across the Curriculum, it just seemed like it would make a lot of sense to pull it together. So I started talking with people at the WAC Clearinghouse and at the Association for Writing Across the Curriculum, and it turned out that everybody thought it was a good idea. I want to thank Michelle Cox, who at the time was chairing the Association for Writing Across the Curriculum, for her contributions to this process. She's been wonderful. She had to step away from it, but Brian stepped in, and I'm really grateful for all the insight and really the great contributions he's made, especially as we've done this kind of hard push at the end to get to the point where we could actually make the awards presentations. I'm really grateful to the editorial board of the Clearinghouse for their feedback and their ideas and for approving this, and to the executive committee of AWAC for all the work they've done. And most important, really, I want to thank all the people who nominated folks for these awards. I want to thank the awards committee, the chairs and the members of those committees. There are more than 24 people, and I think they did a really wonderful job of working with a large number of nominations and coming up with, I think, some outstanding awardees.
Thanks, Mike. In order to take advantage of the virtual format of this conference and also to be respectful of time, we've asked each of the committees to submit some brief remarks announcing their selected winners, followed by brief remarks from the winners themselves. And without further ado, let us introduce you to this year's award winners.
Hello, I'm Heather Faulkner, and I served as chair of the award for Best Article or Chapter focused on WAC pedagogy, theory, or practice. On behalf of my colleagues on the awards committee, Chris Baskier and Chris Anson, I'm pleased to announce that Sunday Watanabe is the inaugural winner of this award. Dr. Watanabe is an associate instructor in the Department of Writing and Rhetoric at the University of Utah. Her chapter, Intercultural Collaboration, Respect, Relationship, Responsibility, and Reciprocity, offers the writing across the curriculum community an opportunity to see what critical Indigenous theory looks like in practice. By focusing on the 4 R's noted in her title, this chapter helps explicate the benefits of both interdisciplinary and intercultural collaborations in disciplinary spaces. Watanabe shows us specifically what it looks like when those in the humanities and engineering collaborate to consider broader notions of what constitutes power and knowledge. Congratulations, Dr. Watanabe, on your award.
It is my honor to accept this award for Best WAC Article or Chapter focused on pedagogy, theory, or practice. I express thanks to committee members who devoted their reading and reviewing time, to Heather Faulkner, chair of the award committee, and to WAC Awards coordinators Mike Palmquist and Brian Hedrickson. Much gratitude goes to Maureen Matheson, editor of Sojourning in Disciplinary Cultures, who invited, encouraged, commented on, and guided my chapter on intercultural collaboration. Maureen recognized this work as not only valuable to our manuscript, but also to the field, acknowledging the insight afforded by bringing Indigenous theory and practice into the story of sojourning. I feel it a great privilege to have been afforded the knowledge and gifts of brilliant Indigenous friends, mentors, and scholars, without whose work my own would not have been possible. Today, I especially acknowledge fellow members of the NCTE and 4C's American Indian Caucus. Finally, my thanks go to those in my home place, the Department of Writing and Rhetoric Studies at the University of Utah, who have supported and invigorated my work. To everyone who played a role and brought this chapter and award into being, I thank you.
I'm Maya Poe, and I was chair of the committee for the Best WAC Research Article or Chapter focused on research. And along with committee members Lee Nickerson and Meg Mithkovitz, we selected Heather Falconer's article, I think when I speak, I don't sound like that, The Influence of Social Positioning on Rhetorical Skill Development in Science. In her article, Heather Falconer lays out a compelling case for how literacy practices are deeply entwined with intersecting social identities. Drawing on the case study of Anne, a young academically gifted woman originally from South America who identifies as African American, Falconer demonstrates that the communities of practice are not always generous to those who have been historically relegated to the periphery. Falconer shows that minoritized students need more than explicit instruction. They need to see themselves in scientific practice through intentional interventions and guided participation that acknowledges the multiple identity positions they possess. As written communication editor Chad Wickman said in his nomination letter, Heather Falconer's article is timely, richly developed and, quote, offers a foundation and perhaps model for other scholar practitioners who like to engage in similar inquiries and teaching practices in STEM or otherwise. Like Wickman, the committee members look forward to seeing Heather Falconer's research emerge as a touchstone for the field and program development. Thank you.
I am beyond honored to be the recipient of this year's Research Article Award, especially considering the level of scholarship in WAC research that has been published in the last few years. Thank you to the award committee for recognizing my article and its contribution to the field. I'd also like to thank Chad Wickman at Written Communication for publishing it in the first place. Thank you, as well as for nominating it. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Chad. The work that this article stems from is immensely personal to me, and it's critical that I also acknowledge the students and faculty mentors at John Jay College, CUNY, who were part of the overall study. It is not easy opening up your life and experiences to a stranger in particular. Without Anne's openness, this article never would have happened. So I am deeply indebted to them. Finally, I would like to thank Neil Lerner, Laura Prozac, and Kevin Smith for providing feedback on early drafts of this article. Our research never happens in a vacuum, and I am immensely grateful to those who have become part of my writing and research community. You are all rock stars.
I'm David Russell, chair of the committee to select the best edited collection, along with Christy Gudhari and Kendon Kurzer. I'm happy to announce the winner out of the 5 nominees is Theories and Methods of Writing Center Studies, a Practical Guide, edited by Joe Makowitz and Rebecca Day Babcock. The book, the committee agreed, will be enormously helpful to those doing WAC and WID work, as it so often grows out of or is coordinated with writing center work. And many of the most successful models and tools of WAC-WID are writing center based. The book is, as its title says, theoretical, methodological, and above all, practical. And it specifically brings to the fore issues that have become profoundly important in terms of inclusiveness and justice. The committee also gives an honorable mention to graduate writing across the disciplines, identifying, teaching, and supporting. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this award. Thanks to Joe for inviting me to participate in this project. It was very enjoyable to collaborate with her. I would also like to thank all of the contributors for their work and their excellent chapters. We'd like to thank the people at Taylor and Francis for believing in the project and working us through the publication of the book. And I would like to especially thank graduate student James Coggins for his nomination. We're honored by this award, and we hope the book helps the profession and especially the graduate students.
And I want to thank Becky for working with me on the book. She was amazing to work with, and her wealth of knowledge was amazing to see in action. I want to thank the contributors who were fabulous people and generous and kind, and it was wonderful to work with them. I want to thank Clint Gardner from the Rocky Mountain Writing Centers Association for having the book as for the summer read last summer. I want to thank the WAC Council and all the folks at Rutledge who helped us with the book. And thanks, everybody. We really appreciate it.
The Best Authored Book Award is given to Michelle Cox, Jeffrey Galen, and Dan Meltzer for Sustainable WAC, a whole systems approach to launching and developing writing across the curriculum programs, published by NCTE. Sustainable WAC provides an apt blend of theory and practice for anyone asked to build, revise, or resuscitate a WAC program. The theoretical framework and questions provided in every section will help scholars and administrators find new ways to think about situations and problems and reflect on the complex ecology of their institutions. The committee also wanted to recognize Michelle LaFrance's Institutional Ethnography, a Theory of Practice for Writing Studies Researchers, with an honorable mention. This extremely well-written book provides an innovative approach to ethnographic research methods. Thank you.
We are so honored and grateful that our book, Sustainable WAC, was selected for the Best Authored Book Award. We have too many people to thank, so we're going to just choose a few in our brief time here. First, we'd like to thank Mike Palmquist for his leadership of the awards committee, and Brian Hendrickson and Susan Murphy for leading the committee for this particular award. We'd like to thank Bonnie Graham, our editor at NCTE, and her entire team for their work on this book. We'd like to thank Barbara Woolford for writing the preface for the book, as well as for her scholarship and leadership in the field, which really inspired our work. We'd like to thank all of those who attended our 4Cs, IWAC, and WPA presentations and workshops, particularly Steve Simpson and Stacy Sheriff, whose feedback really helped enrich the book.
We would also like to express our thanks for the incredible writing collaboration that we experienced with each other as authors. We wrote this book completely on Google Docs, meeting every other week. We all look forward to our bi-weekly meetings, the laughs, the ways we complemented each other's thinking, and the enjoyment of writing the book over the course of 3 years to percolate our ideas.
Our work on building sustainable WAC programs continues. We're working collaboratively with a consortium of 6 WAC programs who are applying the whole systems approach. The WAC directors at these programs are Cheryl Duffy, Chris Fosen, John Paul Camwit, Chris Elder, Melody Pugh, and Marco Del Hierro. We're conducting a longitudinal study looking at concrete evidence of the impact of the whole systems approach. And we hope to be able to share some data from this study soon. And thank you again for the award.
I'm Joan Mullen, and with Michael Pemberton and Stacy Sheriff, present the IWAC Dissertation Award to both Heather Falconer from Northeastern University and Justin Nichols from Roger Williams University. In Triple Binds and Unintended Consequences, exploring scientific discursive identity development with 3 women of color, Heather Falconer uses case studies and situated ethnographic methodology to analyze the complex ways in which race, gender, culture, mentorship, and personal histories contribute to or inhibit how women of color develop discursive identities as scientists. In exploring how chemistry and English majors understand and construct disciplinary identities in relation to life, departmental and writing experiences, implications for WAC and retention, Justin Nichols gathers a large student sample, carefully critiques his methodology and the ethical considerations that guide his research in order to present a detailed and meticulous picture of the complex relationships that attend disciplinary identity formation in these 2 very different disciplines. Both of these studies speak across higher education conversations and writing studies, and both significantly add to our knowledge about effective, high-impact practices, mentoring, and retention. And we congratulate both of them.
What an honor it is to be a co-recipient of the Best Dissertation Award this year. Thank you to the committee for recognizing this work. Thank you to my nominators, Maya Poe and Neil Lerner. The 2 of you were amazing mentors during my candidacy, and your feedback, along with Ellen Cushman's, helped me to grow as a researcher and writer in ways that I never anticipated. I'm proud to call you both colleagues and friends. Thank you too to the students and mentors who opened their lives to me during this project. Though the dissertation was part of a much larger study, the 3 women it focuses on were more transparent than any researcher could ever hope for. Thank you to them and to their mentors for allowing me to get a glimpse into their lived experiences as scientists.
I'm honored that my dissertation was selected as an outstanding dissertation. Thank you to the WAC Clearinghouse and the Association for Writing Across the Curriculum. Thank you to Brian Hendrickson for nominating me, and for my dissertation chair, David Hanauer, who really helped me, learn how to do research studies. All right. Thank you very much.
Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. I'm John Center-Sapico, and I served as the chair of the WAC Early Career Contributions to the Field Award this year. On behalf of the awards committee, I'm pleased to announce that we had many excellent entries for this award. The committee had some tough decisions to make, and we arrived at 2 entries tied at the top. The first winner is Dr. Genevieve Garcia de Mueller, who is the Director of Writing Across the Curriculum in the Writing Studies, Rhetoric, and Composition Department at Syracuse University. In addition to her research and publications, she developed a timely anti-racist WAC toolkit. This toolkit is designed to allow her to reveal academic discourse that upholds white supremacist ideologies of language. Under Garcia de Mueller's leadership, Syracuse's WAC program earned a 4C Writing Program Certificate of Excellence Award. Congratulations and thank you, Genevieve, for your hard work and offerings to the field. The second early career contributions to the field winner is the collaborative team of Al Harap, Brian Hendrickson, and Elisa Russell. Dr. Harap is at the University of Oklahoma. Dr. Hendrickson is at Roger Williams University, and Dr. Russell is at Wake Forest University. These three colleagues are founders of the WAC Go organization, and since creating WAC Go, they have been actively contributing to the field collaboratively and independently. Al and Brian have served as co-managing editors of Exchanges. Elisa is currently on the board of the AWAC Clearinghouse, and Brian is currently serving as co-chair of the Association for Writing Across the Curriculum's Partnership Committee and on AWAC's executive board. Al, in turn, has served at various times as a member of the editorial board of the Clearinghouse and is serving as chair for AWAC's Diversity and Inclusion Committee. One recommender says of these collaborators, quote, "I can think of no young scholars who have done more to advance WAC on a national level as well as in their individual local contexts than these three outstanding members of the WAC community." Congratulations and thank you, Elisa, Brian, and Al, for your hard work and offerings to the field.
A huge thank you to AWAC and the Clearinghouse for honoring the three of us with this award. Getting connected with one another to start the WAC graduate organization was definitely one of the most serendipitous and rewarding opportunities of our grad school experiences.
We established WAC Go because there wasn't a shared space for early career WAC professionals to congregate, and so that others who would come after us would have that. And we thank the WPA Go and the IWCA Go for being an inspiration for us.
Thanks especially to Michelle Cox, Jeff Galen, Michelle LaFrance, Dan Melzer, and Mike Palmquist for their early and consistent support, not only of us, but WAC Go and the graduate students it serves.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Maureen Matheson, and I served as chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Award. On behalf of my colleagues on the awards committee, Cheryl Ball and Tracy Gardner, I'm pleased to announce that Genevieve Garcia de Muller is the inaugural winner of this prestigious award. Dr. Garcia de Muller is assistant professor and director of WAC in the Department of Writing Studies, Rhetoric, and Composition at Syracuse University. As WAC director, she emphasizes diversity and inclusion in working with faculty and has created the Anti-Racist WAC Toolkit, available to all on the WAC campus homepage. According to the website, the goal of Campus WAC is to create writing-intensive courses with anti-racist instruction and assessment. She also holds workshops for people across campus, and fellows who have participated have called the workshop transformative and giving agency to students. In addition to being director of WAC, Dr. Garcia de Muller is the founder and chair of the Council Writing Program Administration People of Color Caucus. On behalf of the committee and all of us, congratulations, Dr. Garcia de Muller. I'd also like to acknowledge two WAC directors who have received honorable mention. The first is Dr. Vani Kanan, who is an assistant professor in the Department of English and director of WAC at Lehman College, CUNY. And the second person is Elon Justin Pavlinich, who is a Byron K. Trippett Assistant Professor of English at Wabash College. Congratulations.
Brian Hendrickson here again, and I have the distinct pleasure of announcing this year's winners of the Distinguished Fellow Award, which recognizes scholars who have made significant contributions to the field of WAC through scholarship, service, or innovative program administration. Because this is the first WAC Awards ever, my committee and I found ourselves in the unique position of having to make up for 50 years of lost time. Luckily, we received an incredible number of compelling nominations. Thus, we've taken advantage of our unique position to recognize roughly as many distinguished fellows as there might have been distinguished fellow awards given out every other year for the past 50 years. Unfortunately, the number of awards does not lend itself to including remarks introducing each winner or acceptance remarks from each winner. Luckily, our cohort is such that you will recognize just how deserving each of our winners is by name alone. And the winners are Anthony Pare, Art Young, Barbara Wolverd, Carol Rutz, Charles Bazerman, Chris M. Anson, Chris Tice, Dan Melzer, David R. Russell, Elaine Mayman, Georgia Rhodes, Jeffrey R. Galen, Joan A. Mullen, John C. Bean, Julia Chen, Magnus Gustafsson, Marty Townsend, Michael A. Pemberton, Michelle Cox, Mike Palmquist, Pamela B. Childers, Pamela Flash, Paula Carlino, Pavel Zemlyansky, Susan H. McLeod, Teresa M. Red, Terry Myers Zawacki, Vicki Tolar Burton. On behalf of myself, my awards committee co-chair Mike Palmquist, AWAC, the WAC Clearinghouse, and all our awards committee members, I want to extend a heartfelt congratulations to all our award recipients. Thank you for your noteworthy contributions to the field. And thank you again to everyone who made these inaugural WAC Awards possible. Here's to many more years of WAC Awards to come.
I'm looking forward to our plenary talk today from Pamela Flash and Teresa Red. Annie Halseth is going to introduce them, and so I'll turn it back over to Annie, who has prepared some opening remarks.
All right, thank you so much, Mike, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Annie Halseth, and I'm one of the Associate Directors for this year's IWAC conference. First of all, a heartfelt congratulations to all recipients of the WAC Awards, and thank you for your contributions to the field. Today, I'm honored to introduce our plenary speakers, Pamela Flash and Teresa Red. Pamela Flash serves as the Director of Writing Across the Curriculum, co-director of the Center for Writing, and affiliate graduate faculty for the Literacy and Rhetorical Studies minor at the University of Minnesota, where she has taught and served as a program administrator since 1991. Flash is the founding director of the Writing Enriched Curriculum program, which offers academic departments a structured, faculty-driven approach to strengthening relevant writing instruction within undergraduate curricula. She's also the founding director of the University of Minnesota's Interdisciplinary Teaching with Writing program, which offers an annual series of workshops, seminars, and instructional consultations designed to support effective writing instruction within diverse contexts. Her research, publications, consultations, and presentations focus on the WEC model, writing pedagogy, composition theory, discourse communities, and the use of qualitative research methods to enable pedagogic change on individual, departmental, and institutional levels. We also have Teresa Red, who is a former director of Howard University's WAC program. Dr. Red served on the board of consultants for the International Network of Writing Across the Curriculum programs for nearly 20 years. In June 2016, she retired from Howard as a full professor after 33 years of service, including nearly 13 years as the director of Howard Center for Excellence in Teaching, Learning, and Assessment, and 24 years as the director of the WAC program. A winner of Howard's Teaching Excellence Award, Red has earned a national reputation for her scholarship and service. She has published numerous articles and chapters about pedagogy and writing, as well as 2 books, Revelations, an anthology of expository essays by and about Blacks, and A Teacher's Introduction to African American English, What a Writing Teacher Should Know. She's also served on the editorial boards of 3 national journals, the executive committee of the Conference on College Composition and Communication, and the advisory board for the HBCU Symposium on Rhetoric and Composition. In addition, in 2019, she helped plan and facilitate AWAC's first Summer Institute for WAC Directors. Thank you so much, Pamela and Teresa, for joining us today. Now, I'll hand the presentation over to you.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Annie. I'm going to share my screen. I feel like in many ways, the title of our talk today has been answered by these fabulous awards that we've just heard. And I'm so excited about the publications. I feel like this really was in many ways the plenary before the plenary. But I want to welcome you all on behalf of Teresa and myself. We welcome you to the second plenary address. It's the second installment in kind of this verbal conjugation series of WAC in the past tense. We had those great presentations by Chris Tice and Carol Rutz on Monday, WAC in the present tense, right here, right now, and WAC in the future tense, which Al Harahap, Federico Navarro, and Alyssa Russell will bring us on Friday. Before going any further, I'd also like to give a shout out to our friend and colleague, Michelle Cox. And I think I saw her on the chat, so I'm glad that she's here. Michelle was initially part of our plenary team, and her thinking, her ideas really inspired much of what we're going to be talking about today. Finally, I want to thank Jessie McLean for all she's already done and what she's about to do to help us move what we had planned as a kind of raucous, dynamic town hall discussion into this virtual environment. We hope that the raucousness and dynamism are retained, and she's the one who's going to help us to do that. When Mike invited us to provide a plenary address back in August 2019, he said what he had in mind was kind of a stakeholder status report. Is talk celebrating our collective successes and also pointing out to areas where we may be falling short of our collective goals. Since 2019, however, I and most of us came to learn that the status of our programs, our field, all fields, all institutions, all people in all parts of the globe had entered a time of rapid change and reckoning. The pandemic was and is changing the shape of education in general and in writing instruction in particular. And as a result, our home institutions are reorganizing fiscal, curricular, and pedagogic priorities. At the same time, our increased exposure to the killing of Black, Indigenous, and people of color by police has accelerated and expanded global discussion of structural inequity, and in our field, ways in which academic discourse and elements of writing instruction contribute to systems of inequity, racism, and exclusion. As a result, many of us, as we've been hearing in this conference, are reorganizing our research, reorganizing some of our teaching priorities, and our approaches to supporting faculty colleagues who teach with writing. All this to say that harnessing the current moment with a status report of WAC programs began to seem not only tricky, but unlikely. Our title question is one that seems best addressed with further questions than with fast, pat, backward-looking, or generalizable answers. We decided that the best use of this second plenary was for us all to present it together, for us to collectively answer WAC at 50, where are we now? Our title question, that's our title question. So let's see, we decided, sorry, I lost my place by tapping my watch. Where are we now? And based on our answers, determine which questions we will prioritize as we move into the future tense. WAC has a long history of making change, and we think that change-oriented activity is best predicated on diverse perspectives and agreed upon questions. We're here to consider perspectives, and agree upon the questions. And to help us set the stage and framing for our collective plenary, Teresa and I began the process by asking you for your perspectives. We did this by administering a 3-question survey in which we invited you and other WAC colleagues to describe the current status of WAC inside and outside your institutional contexts. We asked you how you were weathering the pandemic. We asked you how and if you were addressing systems of racism, exclusion, and inequity. Finally, we asked you to think beyond your individual context and what was happening at the moment, to name 1 to 3 questions that you felt we, the international WAC community, should be prioritizing at this moment. In this address, we'll continue this discussion with you. For each of the survey questions, Teresa and I will present a set of themes that we found in your survey data, your ideas in your words. And then Jesse will be putting you into breakout rooms to discuss some of these things together very briefly. So imagine yourself kind of leaning over the table to talk to one another in a virtual environment. For the COVID question, you'll be talking about what of the changes that the pandemic inspired in your context and in our collective context you think we should support, keep, continue, and which you think we should make a concerted effort to discontinue. For the racism and equity question, you'll be discussing in breakout rooms how you can handle and how we can help each other handle some of the forces of pushback that we're meeting as we begin to and continue to pursue that agenda. Finally, Teresa and I will in tandem present a 7-question synthesis of the 181 questions you generated. We'll end the plenary with a poll. And so you'll have a chance to log in your vote, your choices of 1 to 3 questions you feel we should prioritize as we move forward, how we can really present our and support our future tense. All right, so with that, I want to say a few words about who took the survey. Knowing that people involved in WAC wear many hats, we asked survey takers to self-identify with a select all question. Many of you identify as faculty members who teach with writing, who lead WAC programs, and who conduct WAC research. Other members are other people who took the survey are members of WAC teams. And while we recognize that 99 respondents isn't the entire WAC universe, I will say that some of the themes that we found in your data really resonated with what we've been hearing as we've been joining virtual meetings over the last year and a half. With that, though, we invite any other perspectives, if you feel that your perspective is not really accommodated by our themes and our synthesis, we hope that you'll perk up and chat your responses in the chat window and also bring your perspectives to the breakout rooms. All right, so with that, I want to go into the first question. I'm going to be presenting some of the data around the first question. Teresa is going to work with the second question, and again, together we'll work with the third. So we wanted to really think about the tangible and intangible effects that the COVID pandemic has had on WAC at your institution. Coding your data, I found 5 broad themes. And as a reminder, this survey was wide open. We didn't ask you to weigh in on a variety of themes. We asked you in a more open and capacious way what was surfacing for you. So some of the things that were surfacing for you were fiscal security. The pandemic was impacting the fiscal security of your programs. It was influencing both the volume, the amount of programming you were able to offer on your campuses, and the impact that you perceive that programming is having. The pandemic affected our collective energy and motivation. We are an energetic group, and this was testing us in many ways. The pandemic was, according to survey results, really changing some of the ways in which people were connecting both inside their institutions and outside their institutions, connecting with faculty colleagues, connecting with WAC colleagues. And finally, many of you mentioned some of the ripple effects that the pandemic was having beyond some of these concerns that we've just mentioned. So I'm going to take some of these one by one, and I'm going to present the findings generally, and then I will have a few quotes. I think it's important to hear your words as spoken into the survey. We suspect that for many of you, fiscal security is the mother of all concerns. Funding secures your time. It secures the time of others. It really allows you to do some of the programming that you want to do and sustain the programming that you offer. That said, we also know that fiscal models of WAC vary broadly. Some institutions have dedicated programs and dedicated staff for WAC. Some are run largely by individuals who are working on a case overload or on goodwill. And so the fiscal apparatuses surrounding your programs vary. Some of what we saw was that during the pandemic, money that had gone into WAC programs was being put into more central administrative efforts where Centers for Teaching and Learning and Information Technology services were giving broad programming, and to some extent WAC programming and WAC funding was being impacted. Here are a couple of the quotes that we had in response to this question. And we hope that with these quotes, you'll find yourself kind of reacting with, yes, that's what's happening on our campus, or, oh my God, that's what's happening on your campus. How can we support you? Variety of different responses. So here were two responses, two quotes. Writing was cut entirely, sending a pretty clear message that those faculty members considered it extra and unnecessary for reaching their course objectives. So some people really saw this as a step backward. Severe economic impact. Reduction of teachers and staff in our instructional support office, a demand from upper administration to do more alongside furloughs, mistrust between faculty and upper administrators. So these were some of the comments by those of you who described budgets being cut, frozen, or in a more prosaic way, people talked about budgets being chilled, right? So these were some of the reactions. On the other hand, a minority, but a refreshing minority, saw funding and security increase as a result of the pandemic. These are instances where the collective recognition of the importance of writing and writing instruction and the role that writing and effective assignments and multimodal feedback play needed to be backed up with resources. Increased funding to support faculty development in my institution in response to moving faculty online has given me campus-wide opportunities to facilitate faculty development workshops and institutes that I would not have normally had an opportunity to do. It has facilitated funding opportunities and faculty reaching out for more resources and collaboration. Right, so these are some of the impacts that the pandemic has had. We also found many responses from people who were kind of glass half full and glass half empty at the same time. And so here's an example of one of those. We've lost faculty members, but administrative leaders are working to see what is important to preserve and strengthen in terms of writing support and instruction. Willing to be bold. I almost feel like we may end up with something stronger in the end. We hope so. So that was the fiscal bucket. Programming was impacted. Of the 54 who mentioned programming, about half of you described decreases in programming wrought by the pandemic. The programming that we offer, faculty workshops, consultations, short courses, provision of resources, the bread and butter of activity for many WAC programs, has been impacted in a variety of different ways. Where programs and positions were cut, programming was decreased. Some who didn't mention cuts saw reduced requests for workshops simply because the faculty colleagues with whom they worked didn't have the bandwidth to do anything more than they were already doing. Here are some quotes that describe that. The pandemic completely stopped the planning for several projects. We also had fewer requests from our WID partners who were so focused on the basic needs of their own departments. Basically, that just got put on hold because everyone is so burnt out, especially on professional development around pedagogy with the switch to online teaching, right? On the other hand, 23 of you described, or 23 survey takers described increases in programming. Because online instruction involves more writing than ever for some people who had not recognized the integrated nature of writing and writing instruction across the discipline. And because the change was so sudden, many of us found that we needed to switch our programming totally into working with online writing instruction, and that there was a robust audience for this kind of programming. 23 respondents said they saw increases. Some focused on the nuts and bolts of online writing, but others saw an opportunity and an appetite for discussion about things like surveillance technology and how to work with that. Also, inspiring anti-racist approaches to assignments and grading. To meet those needs, WAC teams needed to be agile, innovative, and willing. Here are some quotes from people who saw their programming increase. I think the pandemic has increased interest in WAC. For example, high stakes testing wasn't as easily accomplished, so folks started assigning writing projects instead. We did place on hold smaller workshop series and one visiting scholar, but we also pivoted and held a wildly successful online WAC Institute. COVID has actually galvanized WAC at my institution. We were able to pivot and offer meaningful virtual programs that were also responsive to what is going on in our society. It felt like faculty were more responsive and engaged and eager to participate in these conversations. So in terms of programming, 23 described increases in programming, right? Which is what I just told you. In the kind of glass half empty, glass half full, my budding WAC collaborative morphed into a digital hack synapse. But because of this, I reached more faculty than I ever have before. It was easier to get people to attend short online sessions than when we did things in person. We were able to bring in speakers who would have been too expensive if they hadn't Zoomed in. The year left me exhausted, but also weirdly satisfied from being stretched. Now I'm afraid next year will be a letdown. Well, we hope it isn't a letdown. All right, so thinking about energy and motivation, in my experience, WAC people are innovative, determined, and curious problem solvers, lots of energy, lots of motivation. Many of you indicated that the pandemic impacted your baseline energy and motivation to do what you do. Budget cuts and reduced programming can reduce motivation. Increases in the energy and motivation of faculty needing our help is sometimes motivating, but also sometimes exhausting. So of those of you who describe decreases in energy and motivation, faculty colleagues are just exhausted. Many folks withdrew to their primary responsibilities, like a body pumping blood to the core at the expense of the extremities, so writing being an extremity. Whoops, emotionally anxious, which is especially difficult when you are in an administrative role with part of that job being holding up programmatic community. Of those who described decreases, these are the decreases, of those who described increases in energy and motivation, we see these quotes. Instructors across the disciplines may have been more receptive to WAC consultations, given that many were teaching online for the first time. We also weren't as constrained by physical limitations in holding consultations with instructors of WI courses. I do think faculty are now primed to look critically at their pedagogies and to see writing as a tool for learning. So for some people, the pandemic catalyzed this change that we've been working with for decades. All right. COVID has taught me to be flexible and to consider multiple methods to achieve the same goals I had when teaching face-to-face. It brought some new methods to the forefront that are favorable than older methods. So things to be saved. Finally, the final category before we get to ripple effects is connections. People who teach writing and who support people who teach writing thrive on connectivity. Institutional shutdowns, social isolation orders impacted our ability to connect with colleagues inside our institutions and outside in events that cross institutions. After the initial rush, the SOS calls from across campuses, some of us had to reconcile ourselves to the fact that many of our frequent flyers, our fabulous faculty colleagues, were just tapped out. They couldn't and shouldn't be pushed. So here's a quote: our already siloed university departments became more disconnected, and community and outreach efforts seemed to stop. This is partly due to freezes in funding for WAC programming and partly due to teachers having to spend more time redeveloping courses and assignments for unfamiliar modalities and not having time for extra workshops. In terms of increases, some of you found those. you never know. So some found that cross-curricular partnering is emerging, and as is a commitment to commonality in student learning, opportunity, and diversity. Our WAC committee continued to meet monthly in Zoom, and our Zoom meeting with the provost led to our desired outcome, anchoring the WAC committee as a provost standing committee. So bringing expertise to the fore and getting recognized and being part of these committees. I've been comforted by all the new online events our field has offered, which has given me opportunities to talk to other WAC WPAs, and writing teachers about shared struggles. I found attending digital events, listening to podcasts, and interacting with digital multimodal scholarship has been more feasible for me this year than in past years. So finally, and then we'll turn it over to Teresa, I want to talk just briefly about these ripple effects that people have found and noted in the survey based on the activities surrounding the COVID pandemic. So these are the kind of advertent or inadvertent responses. I'm afraid that I helped my institution see how economical online teaching can be, and that they're moving towards online learning across the curriculum. The shared experience of upheaval caused by the pandemic allowed us to engage departmental faculty in unprecedented discussions about changes to writing instruction and assessment that would have been considered untenable, even outlandish before COVID. Faculty members told us that the move to online instruction essentially tossed all cards in the air. So new collective choices can be made about course structure, prerequisite expectations, what counts as writing, how they do grading. The pandemic has taught me my main priority during these 2.5 online semesters has been human and empathetic attitude to my students above everything else. Our main task as educators should be motivating students to grow despite difficulties, to be flexible, to care. And finally, the pandemic caused faculty to feel the need to finally get down to what was really essential for them, to teach, and what was really essential for students to learn. And faculty often came to the conclusion that they were talking too much, covering too much content, and instead should slow down and give students more chances to engage in active learning strategies, one of which was writing. So with these perspectives, what we'd like to do with Jesse's help is to put you into quick breakout groups. They'll be just under 10 minutes, in which you have a chance to talk about which of these pandemic-inspired changes on your campus or others are worth keeping, and which should really go the other way, which should be discontinued. So with that, Jesse, I turn this to you.
Well, I trust that you had a very stimulating conversation in your breakout room, and I hope you can continue it with some folks at the conference. We're going to go ahead now and look at the responses to survey question number 2 and ask you to discuss a follow-up question related to it. So first of all, can everyone see my screen? Jesse, can you confirm?
Yes, it looks great, Teresa.
Okay,
yeah, I didn't know
great.
if I was the one. Yep, it looks
all right.
Good. Yep.
Okay, so question number 2, if you recall, was how has WAC at your institution responded, if at all, to the call for anti-racism? Now, as Abram X. Kendi has explained, anti-racism is an action. It's not simply refraining from saying and doing racist things. So what I'd like to do today is to share the multitude of ways that you and the other survey respondents have taken action, specifically the strategies and resources. For as one survey respondent wrote, we need to make it known that our discipline has something to say about this and share resources and suggestions that will move the conversation forward in productive ways. So let's start with perceptions. Approximately 43% of you said you had taken action to change perceptions, yours or the perceptions of others, regarding the role of racism in WAC and education in general. The action often was reading. Many of you had read works such as Vishana Shanti Young's Should Writers Use Their Own English, Guldi Muhammad's Cultivating Genius, Asao Inoi's Anti-Racist Writing Assessment Ecologies, and Felicia Rose Chavez's The Anti-Racist Writing Workshop. A number of you cited Syracuse University's anti-racist reading list because it focuses on writing. Now, the readings often became the focus of discussion groups, according to the survey. So one of you said, we provided copies of Guldi Muhammad's Cultivating Genius to faculty and facilitated a 4-part dialogue. People came up with incredible assignments, ideas, activities, commitments. And some of you attempted to change perceptions via workshops. Again, one of the most cited resources was Syracuse University's Anti-Racist WAC Toolkit, which you heard about during the awards ceremony. And quite a few of you invited speakers to discuss research and scholarship on anti-racism. Speakers such as Antonio Bird, Maya Poe, Asao Inouye, Gwendolyn Poe, Ivan Huang, Rishana Shanti Young, and Carmen Kennard. A couple of you even organized conferences about racism in writing. One in particular was Racism in the Margins, a conference sponsored by the University of Connecticut. However, as Kendi has documented, historically, racist perceptions have been generated to justify racist policies and practices. So we need to look above all at how WAC advocates have changed their policies and practices to combat racism. Well, according to the survey, 21% of you said that you had attempted to adopt anti-racist policies. And often that started with committees, with the establishment of committee, as one survey respondent wrote, our plan addresses equity as a sustainability indicator for WAC programs and calls for an equity committee. However, sometimes it was a matter of changing the personnel of existing committees. So one of you wrote, we also expanded our WAC committee to include a multilingual writers representative. Some of you audited your programs. For instance, one of you wrote, we have begun a regular anti-racism audit on our entire program, from website to programming to handouts. And many of you said that your programs or departments had issued statements such as this one. The University Writing Proficiency Committee encourages instructors to recognize the diversity of written English. Assessment of student writing performance should take into account changing norms in grammar, syntax, punctuation, and style across disciplines, contexts, and audiences. Some of these statements actually led to the development of new standards. Here's a case in point. We replaced requirements for students to use standard written English with a requirement that they apply grammar, syntax, punctuation, style, and other editing conventions. And such standards sometimes made it into syllabi. A number of you cited Syracuse University's anti-racist WAC syllabus as a model for revising your syllabi. So, how did you put policies into practice? Well, according to the survey, about 44% of you cited changes in practice, whether those changes had to do with personnel, research, curriculum, instruction, or assessment. In some cases, the changes you made to combat racism had to do with hiring new personnel. For instance, one survey respondent wrote, "The writing program has had some conversations, and in our latest lecturer recruitments, we are soliciting BIPOC applicants more aggressively." The same applies to tutors and writing fellows, student consultants. Here we have a quote, "Our writing center has conducted a survey to discover ways to diversify our pool of student consultants." But sometimes WAC advocates needed to reach beyond the writing programs for assistance or to form what one respondent called cross-campus coalitions to fund or take action against racism. So we have here the case of a respondent who wrote, "I have also collaborated with my peers in the communication and service learning programs to learn more about their approaches and content." Surprisingly, only a few of you mentioned conducting anti-racist research. Here's a quote from a WAC WPA, "I have a chapter coming in an anti-racist collection, such as the one you see pictured here, performing anti-racist pedagogy in rhetoric, writing, and communication." Another respondent wrote, "A WAC internship for undergraduate students has provided academic and design support for a scholar on a significant anti-racist research project." There were far more references to curricular change. For instance, here's one quote, "One of our WAC team members is developing a program around social justice and anti-racist teaching." A WAC instructor wrote, "I shifted the intro to rhetorical theory to begin with indigenous rhetoric and to center decolonial, anti-racist, and feminist orientations rather than Greco-Roman orientations." And a WAC program leader wrote, "We followed the university's workshop with a discussion about how faculty could include readings and writing to learn assignments that increase and value the diversity of voices in their courses, challenge disciplinary habits of exclusion, and provide tools for listening. We also urged them to assign writing in response to diversity readings rather than just assigning the readings." There were changes in instructional strategies as well. Here's a noteworthy quote. "We want students to have opportunities to use their own authentic voices, to be true to who they are and grow in their identity. Yet we are also being transparent about the industry expectations around written communication and are having much more candid conversations with students about learning to navigate this. But above all, respondents to the survey cited changes in the ways they approached the assessment of writing. Some of you made it very clear, in fact, one respondent wrote that assessment was, quote, a place of action for operationalizing the diversity, equity, and inclusion statements. That this was a place where things could really happen. And so many of you emphasized that this was where linguistic justice needed to take place. So we have, for instance, this quote, "We have aimed to offer workshops on how to focus on writing assessment that does not penalize students who choose not to write in or have been traditionally distanced from resources allowing access to what has popularly been called standard edited English." Again, one of the main resources that some of you mentioned was Syracuse University's anti-racist WAC assessment document. Now, some of you focused on feedback, citing the need to re-examine how we as teachers of WAC actually respond even before we grade. So one respondent wrote, "As part of the workshop, we introduced a conversation about how feedback on papers can unwittingly become a microaggression, how feedback could be honest, but also affirming instead." And another one of you wrote, "Finally, we touched on responses to writing by L2, first generation and international students that recognize that patch writing, close paraphrase, collaboration, and quote unquote plagiarism are cultural constructs and might more usefully be discussed as such rather than assuming intent to deceive." Some of you said that you were trying out or teaching alternative methods of grading or not grading at all. Labor-based grading contracts were mentioned most of all in those assessment remarks in the survey. Well, in spite of the overwhelming support for anti-racist action in this survey, the survey also revealed some pushback. And I want to share two of the comments that are revealing and disturbing. First, we have had a difficult time doing that anti-racist work institutionally, as we have encountered some serious pushback. While we have allies in other offices who similarly want to do this work, we have also encountered individuals who are offended that we would be sharing such information with our program members and see it as a personal attack, us implying they are racist. And check out this quote. "I think those outside of the Southeastern US don't consider or understand the risks and realities of doing anti-racist and DEI work in a red state. As a field, I would like to see calls for anti-racist action more nuanced to recognize the varying degrees of risk that exist for those holding different ranks. For instance, non-tenure track faculty, contingent faculty, graduate teaching assistants, and operating in different political environments. I have colleagues who regularly receive death threats, have their employment threatened, and get backlash from students, colleagues, and upper administrators. So given those comments, I would like you to consider this question: how can you handle pushback? When you go in the breakout rooms, please consider how you can handle pushback, whether it's from your institution, department, program, or from individual faculty, students, even external stakeholders, such as parents, employers, and government officials. So Jesse, could you please open the breakout rooms?
You got it.
Oh, welcome back. Can everyone see the WAC priorities? Great.
Yep.
We hope that you came up with some solutions, at least some responses that people can use in cases with where they have encountered pushback or will be encountering it, because it can happen on an individual basis as well as a programmatic one. But we would like to go on and summarize question number 3 of our survey, which actually asked you for questions. They asked you to prioritize the 1 to 3 questions that the WAC community should address now. So the way that we've tried to summarize those questions is actually to distill those questions into 7 questions. And we would like to present those now. I'll read the question, and then Pamela is going to share some of the sub-questions that are related to each of the 7 questions. So, what should the WAC community prioritize right now? Question number 1, how can we best implement anti-racist policies and practices?
Yep. And some of the sub-questions that you asked, can WAC be used to perpetuate racial injustice? If so, how can we prevent that from happening? Also, what roles can the WAC community play in challenging traditionally constrained and hierarchical academic discourse and assessment norms? Third, how does WAC become a leader in anti-racist work when so many of our methods are primarily responsive and our programs are not seen as mission critical? Finally, how can we do anti-racist DEI work when national and statewide conversations are trying to deter and penalize those practicing this work?
And I'd like to note that this particular question about anti-racist policies and practices was by far the most common question that we encountered in the survey responses to our question number 3. 2, how can we take advantage of this moment to influence decisions about digital text and online instruction?
And 2 sub-questions here. 1, does the curricular and pedagogic chaos surrounding the pandemic open doors to new ways of thinking about multimodal texts and reconceived curricula? And number 2, if online and hybrid teaching is here to stay, how does that affect WAC WID work? What new skills, strategies, and faculty support ideas do we collectively need to support and adopt as WID WAC leaders?
Question number 3, How can we increase attention to critical reading and information literacy?
There were 3 questions here. How can we teach expansive writing reading at a time that privileges individual preferences and entitlement? For example, I can only read about, pay attention to things I'm already interested in. Another of you asked, how can we defend writing instruction from the destructive influence of educational technology products? And number 3, communication about science within society, how to explain research and science to the society in order to fight fake news and wrong assumptions. We should be attending to this.
Question number 4, how can we help one another sustain WAC?
This was another big one. And so people framed their sub-questions in terms of right now, how do WAC programs sustain funding during times of extreme budget crises and university leadership changes? And number 2, on an ongoing basis, how can we help with the logistics and administrative realities of WAC programming, funding, assessment, direction, and administrative support?
Question number 5. How can we improve working conditions for WAC leaders and teachers?
Yeah, and there were 3 sub-questions that you asked here. One was, right now, how do we deal with faculty burnout in WAC? Number 2, on an ongoing basis, how can we increase the value and respect with which WAC work is regarded by students, parents, faculty members, senior administrators, and funders? And finally, how can we make our work more attractive in terms of the working conditions, job prospects, tenure, pay, etc., to open it up for a broader base of diverse instructors? How do we support graduate students to become WAC practitioners and WAC leaders?
Question number 6, how can we collaborate better with internal and external stakeholders?
And there were 3 questions here. 1, right now, sorry, this is number 6. How can we better stakeholder? Right. How can an organization and a community primarily based in the US and dominated by American members and leadership become truly international? And secondly, what's the best way to get the field to invest in longitudinal evidence-based research on the impact of WAC, WID, and WEC programs?
And finally, question number 7, how can we produce more longitudinal, cross-institutional, and transnational research on the outcomes of WAC instruction?
And Teresa, those are really the questions I just asked. So I think we're good. I think we're ready for the vote.
All right. And which 1 to 3 questions then should the WAC community address first? From these 7 that we distilled, which 1 to 3 would you choose? So let me just quickly show them again, all right? How can we best implement anti-racist policies and practices? How can we take advantage of this moment to influence decisions about digital text and online instruction? How can we increase attention to critical reading? All these questions will appear on the poll, so you don't have to memorize them. But please, Jesse, could you launch the poll and they'll see the questions, and could you just quickly choose 1, 2, or 3, no more than 3. Okay.
we've had 73 of 77 folks respond. That might be what we've got to work with here, Teresa.
Okay. All right. Jesse, could you go ahead then and end the poll and show the results? Share the results. Okay. Can everyone see the results? Okay. So it looks like, let me open this up so I can see all 7. All right. It looks like question number one, how can we best implement anti-racist policies and practices, is still the number one question to address. And after that, it looks like number 6 comes, how can we produce more longitudinal, cross-institutional and transnational research on the outcomes of WAC instruction? And after that, it looks like number 3, how can we increase attention to critical reading and information literacy? So questions about anti-racism, questions about research, making it more longitudinal, cross-institutional, transnational, and questions about critical reading and information literacy. We will pass this information on to the opening plenary team, in case they're not here right now, because in fact, this is a segue to the closing plenary, which is essentially about where we should go from here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, everyone. We look forward to seeing you at the rest of the conference.
And perhaps we can give our wonderful plenary speakers a standing ovation, or at least unmute ourselves and clap and do all that. So.
There we go.
Thank you.